Hello, and welcome to the Urban Dharma NC podcast. This is part 2 of a series in which Dorje Lopan Dr. Han Lai teaches about the 5 Buddha families, a tantric organizing principle for understanding our own original wakefulness. Getting to know the 5 Buddha families can allow us a better understanding and recognition of the nuances and qualities of our own awakened nature, like a colorless light when refracted. Urban Dharma is a Buddhist temple in the heart of Asheville, North Carolina. We are supported by your generosity and by our online store, TibetanSpirit.com. To learn more about us, come visit our temple in person, or look us up online at udharmanc.com. Thanks for listening.
So I think the place to start here, since I said that we can use this 5 Buddha families to help us understand the entirety of confusion and clarity, of bondage and liberation, of samsara and nirvana. So then the place to start, I think, would be to look into another text. This text is called the prayer or the aspiration of Kuntu Zampo, which is not the king of noble prayers of Samantabhadra. Samantabhadra is Sanskrit. In Tibetan is Kuntu Zampo. It translates to the all good. The classical Samantabhadra is a bodhisattva figure in Indian Buddhism. And so he represents a bodhisattva. Well, he's a bodhisattva, a great bodhisattva. And there it is said that his vows and his practices are so extensive that he becomes a model for practitioners. And so he has a famous prayer that we have in the recitations book, which is called the King of Noble Prayers, the King of Aspiration Prayers. So that's the Samantabhadra as a bodhisattva. Then you also, in certain texts found in Tibet, there is another figure with an identical name called Samantabhadra, or in Tibetan Kuntu Zampo. And there, that Samantabhadra is the primordial Buddha. Primarily enigma material. The primordial Buddha is addressed as Samantabhadra. In Sarma, meaning the later traditions, which is Kadampa, Sakyapa, Kagyupa, then later Gelugpa, the primordial Buddha is called Vajradhara. So Vajradhara and Samantabhadra kind of function in the same way. Samantabhadra is usually painted blue and naked, no ornaments or anything. So that's Samantabhadra. So there is a Nyingma text called the Aspiration of Samantabhadra, or the Aspiration of Kuntu Zampo. There, Kuntu Zampo, as I said, represents the primordial Buddha. And what are we talking about when we say primordial Buddha?
Unborn, unceasing.
Which is what? Those are qualities of, very good, which is what? When we say primordial Buddha, well, what are we really talking about?
Buddha nature?
Buddha nature, no.
Ground of being?
No.
Ground of being.
He didn't have a sentient. He had no sentient life. Like, no, he wasn't a person.
So what is it? He wasn't a person.
Like
so
he was.
What is it?
It was.
Awareness.
I'm trying to find the word.
Awareness.
He was a Buddha from the very beginning.
Buddha from the very beginning. So what does that mean? Yeah, so primordial, good. Buddha from the very beginning. So what does that mean?
Innate.
The beginning that was beginningless.
Yeah, so tricky, right? Because the Buddhists, won't commit to a beginning. So it's beginningless, right? So first you have to get that first, right? First, the basic Buddhist view of things is beginningless. Then within beginningless, if you want to talk about a beginning, if you're still stubborn and you want to talk about a beginning, what does that beginning look like? Now, in Hinayana, what does that beginning look like? In the context of beginningless. If you insist on talking about the beginning, what does it look like in the Hinayana level of teachings?
Wanting to escape samsara for yourself?
No. Even more beginning than that.
The Buddha?
No. No, as in Genesis, in the beginning was the word.
Just pure.
No, from Hinayana, what does the beginning look like?
The birth of the Buddha?
No.
Luminosity?
Huh? What?
Luminosity?
No.
Confusion.
Okay.
Confusion. Hinayana, hello. Confusion. The first of the 12 links. It's a circle, so there's no first. But if you insist on talking about a first, it's ignorance. Right? The Hinayana teachings are not into speculating. They begin where we are. They say, look at this. What is your experience right now? If your experience right now is Buddha, well, congratulations. We have nothing to tell you. Go away now. But if your current state is, oh, this sucks. Well, then the Buddha says, okay, let's trace back where the suckiness come from. Right? So if you trace it back, you'll see that the Buddha says it came from confusion. That's why it sucks. That's why samsara stinks. Right? So that's the Hinayana position. And there's a lot of wisdom to that, as in no need to speculate about pure, luminous, blah, blah, all that is kind of fairy tales. Because that's not my experience. It's like walking around with, a particular shade of glasses and thinking now everything is the color exactly I want it to be. That's not enough. So there is a lot of kind of, after all, the Buddha taught it, Buddha couldn't be teaching things that are useless. So at that level, he says, it's beginningless. But if you still want to talk about a kind of an understanding of how this came to be, then you could kind of artificially point at some place in this cycle to say, it came from there. Now, of course, in that cycle, it says, where does ignorance come from? Ignorance came from last lifetime. Then last lifetime came from, or the last death, right? At death, then this confused existence is propelled into this life. Where does death come from? Death is the result of old age, which is the result of, so you go back the 12 links of dependent origination, then you come back to again, ignorance. And this goes again and 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 again. Right? Definition of samsara. Yeah? Now, here, in the aspiration of Samantabhadra, we have now moved into Mahayana. And not just Mahayana, we have moved further into Vajrayana. And not only Vajrayana, we have moved into Tibetan Vajrayana. Because this text was revealed in Tibet. Now, of course, it says that, it came from India magically, mysteriously, but historically it was revealed in Tibet. You don't have a Sanskrit text hidden in some cave in India. Or at least until now we don't have. Right? So what does this text say? Or what does this text do? This text picks up on this expression of primordial Buddha. Beginningless Buddha. A Buddha that has always been there. Now, this expression is not a Tibetan concoction. It already started in India. To say Vajradhara is primordial Buddha. So now, given our kind of heritage of the beginning is confusion, what do we do with Vajradhara? Now it seems like there is a zero that is before the one. If the one is confusion, now it seems to be saying, before this one, there was the zero, and the zero is what we call Vajradhara, or Samantabhadra, the all good. So then what is the primordial Buddha?
The end of ignorance.
Shouldn't it be at the end?
Is it like a prototype?
In what way?
In that you can't say what it is.
Great, let's move on.
It signifies.
It has something to do with awareness. It has something to do with Rigpa. Sure. But different. Kind of like the context is different. It's related to awareness. And more specifically, just pure awareness. It's related to that. But what is it? I mean, how does it function?
Well, it was never confused.
Sorry?
It was never confused.
It was never confused. So meaning what?
Nirvana.
Clarity.
That has more to do with the end of applying the process. Which is not different. I mean, we are there. But let's try to, get to a better understanding of what's the purpose of talking about primordial Buddha. Let's think of it that way, rather than thinking, let's figure out what the meaning is. Maybe ask the question of what is the purpose of asserting, of saying there is a primordial Buddha. What's the purpose?
Well, the assumption is that it's our nature. Who we are.
Our potential.
Yeah, so our nature. Yeah, so this is really the consequence of Buddha nature. Right? Now Buddha nature is sort of personified. So now a slightly different genesis, a slightly different origin of confusion is being presented. See, the Buddha's critique of theistic tradition is to say that, so you ask, where did all of this come from? And you say, well, this came from, I think like, if you ask, I know this is like a tactic, or the approach used, like in Asia, I see this, Christian missionaries. They say, well, look around in your house, this table, this chair, was it always there?
No.
And of course you say, oh no, then they say, so how did it get there? Oh well, the chair maker and the table maker was there and made them, and so they're there. And then they will say, well, where did the chair maker and the table maker come from? And until now, they're very Buddhist, actually. It's like, well, the chair maker and the table maker came from, I don't know, their mom and dad. And they're like, well, where does their mom and dad come from? You see where this is going, right? Then eventually they say, well, it must come from a creator God. Right? It all sounds very reasonable. I mean, if we know from experience that this table has not always been here, somebody created it, then you go far back enough, all of this couldn't have just been here. Somebody must have created it. I mean, that's great if you are willing to stop asking that question and arrive at God and say, well, can't ask any further. Where did God come from? Right? Stop. No. You go there, he'll smite you. Right? No more asking. So that's sort of a theistic problem. Buddhists, I mean, as long as we're in the realm of explaining things, you're always going to run into some kind of problems. The Buddhist side would be, okay, where did this come from? Okay, then you trace back, and you go, oh, ignorance. And of course, the Buddhist equivalent of the God problem is, you can't ask where ignorance comes from. It's always been there, right? What's behind that curtain? Nothing. Right? Nothing's behind that curtain. Or it's just ignorance. Well, what's behind the ignorant curtain? Another ignorance. Right? So turtles all the way down. Right? Ignorance all the way down. Now, the Buddhist assertion, the Buddhist genesis, if you want to call it that, at the end of the day, and this is important, it's never about the genesis of what's out there. The Buddhist origin story, you could say, I guess, there are problems putting it in this way, but I can't find a better way to put it. You could say that fundamentally any kind of Buddhist origin stories, right, Genesis stories, is basically a psychological model. It's a narrative to explain our psychology. So when Buddha says that ignorance is the cause of our current dukkha, you could say that there are implications of that statement upon, this. But more fundamental than this is this. We tend to think of samsara as a place, like this place. But samsara is not a place. Samsara is a mode of being. A mode of being. A confused mode of being. So when Buddhists posit, or when the Buddha presents avidya, confusion, marikpa, lack of awareness, as, right, the start, it's not the same as, in the beginning was the Word, right, from John. It's not the beginning of, like the way the Hebrew Bible talks about how it all started. That, they're not interested in psychology. They're interested in this. So likewise, when we talk about primordial Buddha, don't make the mistake of thinking the Big Bang. It's nothing to do with that. It's about this. It's about the experience. So right now our experience is that our mode of being of is filled with confused experiences. So if we follow the Hinayana teachings, then we go all the way to ignorance. And for many Buddhists, that's enough. No need to go further. Because if you have identified ignorance as the cause of confusion or as the cause of suffering, then you go and remove that. But in the Vajrayana system, in the Mahayana is kind of a little bit tentative. Yeah, it's pure, but let's not talk too much about it. Vajrayana is kind of, in your face about it. Yeah? With no apologies. They're going to talk about divine, they're going to talk about pure, they're going to talk about deities, they're going to have all this very flamboyant. And Mahayana is kind of like, yeah, pure, okay, let's move on. Pure but empty. Pure but empty. But actually, you can't yank Vajrayana out of this three part, Hinayana, Mahayana, Vajrayana, as working together. Otherwise, if you yank Vajrayana out of its context, then it becomes eternalism. Everything is pure. Yeah, the problem we talk about the Buddhist teachings as the middle way, right? And the middle way is the way that is free from nihilism or eternalism or essentialism. And what is the problem with these two? Is that neither nihilism nor essentialism leaves any place for action. What's the point of doing anything? If everything leads to nothing, why bother? Nihilism. If everything is meaningless or haphazard, everything is just haphazard. Anything, whatever happens to you, oh, it's luck. Where's luck come from? Who knows? It's luck. Nihilism. Eternalism would be, God has already decided everything will be the way it is, no matter what you do. Or it's already fixed, it's pure. Everything is divine. There's nothing to do also. So we come back to primordial Buddha. So primordial Buddha is talking about actually behind that curtain that you call confusion is the innate nature of being awakened. Now, once they go in that direction, then they have to account for, wait a minute. So are you saying that confusion arose from right? Now you have a problem. And in the theistic tradition, that's the problem of Satan. If God is absolute, where the heck did evil come from? Of course, they do their theological gymnastics to kind of accommodate Satan. Not to say we Buddhists don't do, our Dharma gymnastics to kind of accommodate, right, this confusion in the face of clarity. So one way, now, one way to look at it, so I said, from this aspiration of Samantabhadra, one section of it says this. It says at first, so this is as good as it gets, right? In the beginning. Yeah. It says at first, for bewildered beings, which is their translation of samsaric beings, See, even this, when they want to talk about beginning, they begin at already samsara. Because in a way, it's like you can't escape that. Where else do you start? You know? So it says, at first, for samsaric beings, awareness did not arise on the ground. Meaning on the ground level, right, at the beginning, which is beginningless, awareness did not arise. There was no awareness. That obscurity of unconsciousness is the cause of ignorance. So now they are giving a more subtle read on this ignorance that generally all Buddhists accept. So they say, so what is that? What is that ignorance? That ignorance is simply awareness not arising on the ground. And you say, what is the ground? The ground is, in this case, samantabhadra. The all good. That means awareness did not cognize itself. And not recognizing itself, then everything goes from there. Or devolves from there. So it goes on to say, from that unconsciousness emerged terrified, blurry cognition. Self and other and enmity were born from that. Through the gradual intensification of habit, sequential entry into samsara began. Then the 5 afflictive emotions developed. Then the actions that issue from these 5 poisons become unceasing. Then the 6 realms manifest. Then all the sufferings are experienced. So a moment of lack of awareness. Awareness of what? Awareness of awareness itself. So another kind of poetic way to express is when awareness goes outside. When awareness goes outside. When awareness goes to play outside. In that moment, unawareness has begun. So this primordial awareness is the primordial Buddha. Is the Buddha nature. Failing to recognize itself, then, so it says 1 ground, 2 paths. This is a common kind of, I think, more so in Dzogchen than Mahamudra. 1 ground, 2 paths. So 1 became sentient being, and 1 becomes samantabhadra. So in a way, the ground is even more basic than samantabhadra. In that ground, once there is this lack of recognizing awareness as itself, then it devolves into samsara. But if there is recognition, there is awareness, then in that moment, it's samantabhadra. It's the all good. So now, the primordial Buddha isn't something or someone out there. Why? Because in every moment of our... So we think of samsara as outside. We also think of samsara as something that continues with or without you. Actually, it's not. Samsara is constantly produced with the arising of each moment, each thought. Samsara is not a place out there, it's not a condition out there, It is your very mode of being. So if and our being is not one thing. It's momentary. It arises moment to moment. In the arising of each moment, that moment, and so they give some numbers, exactly if it is, who knows. But a point is being made. In that moment, they say, you can divide it into 60 parts. The first part of the 60 part is pure, the ground. It's when it's just the ground. In the second part of the 60 parts, it either becomes samantabhadra, in which case then it's what they call self-liberated, or it's samsara. Because in that first moment of ground, then the second moment, if there's no awareness, then it becomes confusion. Then moment part 2 to part 60, it's all confused. But if there's recognition, then part 2 to part 60, it's samantabhadra. Then in the next moment, because this is samantabhadra, in the next moment, again the ground, and then in the second moment of that, in the second part of the next moment, is there awareness or not? If there's no awareness, then it's samsara again. Yes.
So you're saying that there can be sometimes moments of awareness, but then gone. They come and go, come and go. But once we've come into this world, it seems like we are
See, you're thinking about the big coming into the world.
Yeah.
These teachings are always about this very moment of mind.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have to apply the ground talk, the primordial Buddha talk, all of that, not in some sort of out there, not even like in this lifetime when I was born, but now.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that changes things.
Yeah. Otherwise, you turn into what we call mutikpa, heretics. We're not so concerned about heretics, but in India and Tibet, very concerned about heretics. So within that, now we turn to the 5 Buddha families, and the place to start actually is in the klesha. Look at this chart. So we start the Hinayana way, so to say. So when we start with the Hinayana way, we have to start with klesha. You see the third attribute, klesha. Klesha means afflicted emotions, afflictive emotions. And so these are the 5 root or basic forms of afflictive emotions. Ignorance. So that's the most basic. Now you want to say, where does ignorance come from? Ignorance comes from unawareness. In Dzogchen language, marikpa. Rikpa is awareness. Marikpa is lack of awareness. Then ignorance, or bewilderment, or confusion. Once there is bewilderment and confusion, then aggression arises and passion arises, or attachment. Aggression and attachment. Now you see I have picked up which Buddha families?
Vajra and Padma.
Buddha, Vajra and Padma. Right? Buddha, Vajra and Lotus. And these are the 3 families under the earlier model of the three Buddha families. You can see how the three Buddha families then get elaborated into the five Buddha families. Because these are the three poisons: ignorance, attachment, and aversion are the three poisons. From the interaction of the three poisons, you get the other two derivative poisons, which is pride and jealousy.
Where is envy?
Envy is under jealousy, a subset of that. They go into very fine details about, jealousy with a little bit of a flavoring from over here. It's this kind of an emotion and this kind. So they identify 60 some types or 50 some types of combinations of minds. But the jealousy and envy, because sometimes it's English words that they have chosen differently to translate. But these are the 5 root afflictive emotions. So from ignorance arises aggression and attachment, and the interaction of these produces pride and jealousy. So that's our 5 basic. From the perspective of where does suffering come from? Suffering definitely comes from these 5 things. And suffering is experienced as these 5 things. When we say suffering comes from, it's not as if, these 5 are suffering itself. Right? Agree? Yes? Any questions or comments, whether here or folks magically participating from other universes? Finally, we have actualized some of the miracles for ordinary beings. The Buddha taught, it says, all the world systems everywhere. They were anticipating this day. Is everyone still there?
I guess I don't know if it's a question, maybe you can elaborate. That term ground, it always kind of trips me up. Because I don't know if, it's not something it's not in our way of thinking, because we think ground, it's bottom, but it's not exactly like that. So
yeah. There are tendencies to read or interpret or to understand ground closer to the way we normally understand ground. Even in Buddhist teachings, even in teachers' teaching. Some teachers are much more comfortable letting us think of it as kind of a universal collective. So they do go in the direction and talking about it as if it's something like we might call the collective unconscious. Yes, yeah, and then like expressions like the ground of being, But really, the Buddhist tradition more or less shies away from the ground of being, the collective unconscious. Because whenever any Buddhist, historically, kind of begin to waver in that direction, his cohorts or her cohorts will say, you're going too far. Because you're about to bump into metaphysical talk, the God talk, the spirit talk, spirit as in your higher self and all of that. Because as a tradition, the Buddhist tradition, contrary to what many of us think, is actually very reticent and uncomfortable talking about mystical things. Because the historical Buddha himself kind of considered those to be kind of nice to talk about, but not really much to do with this body, this mind. Now, which is not to say that Buddhists didn't get into that, or Buddhists didn't get into metaphysical assertions and debates. They certainly did. And in order to be a tradition that to continue in India, they have to. When I was in Arkansas last weekend, I talked about how, when the historical Buddha died, what was the responsibility of those who survived him was to quickly fine-tune and articulate the brain. I know that's such a terrible word, but it's true. Like they had to, because if they didn't quickly articulate and kind of fine-tune what the brain is, we wouldn't have any of these teachings today. Right? So then the brain not quickly, but over time, as the other brands kind of developed, they too were under pressure to develop. As the other brands talk about the ground of being, this brand, one way or the other, has to say something about that. Yeah? Then, eventually, what we call religion came together, the Buddhist religion, with all the trappings of religion. But within this, the Dharma continues. But yeah, in articulating the brand, and you have to remember that the brand that was kind of articulated and then passed down was articulated in relation to other brands. So it would be interesting to ask the question, although it's completely hypothetical, what if other brands then, the various forms of Hindu thought, and Jain thought and all of that, what if those weren't the conversation partners of the Buddhist tradition? Then how would Buddhism look like today? Interesting, I don't know.
I have some questions from...
Yes.
How is a klesha an attribute of the Buddhas? How is attribute understood in this way?
Kleshas are not attributes of Buddha. The word here, attributes here, it simply means that these kleshas are related. Right? They belong to, they are organized under the families. So in a minute we'll get to that, because out of the klesha, from there the most immediate is we talk about the wisdom, and then you'll see how they might be kind of how one is the light and the other is the shadow.
You mentioned the word sharpening.
Mm-hmm.
Is it in relation to, I might sharpen in the west and Padma, and then my shadow, or see the tougher the path in one area is going to make
no, not in that sense. Not in that sense. Yeah, not in the sense of shadow. Yeah.
And then another question.
Mm-hmm.
Would Buddhists say that recognition of self as undifferentiated, even in the face of form, is the enlightened recognition?
Could you repeat that?
Would Buddhists say that recognition of self as undifferentiated, even in the face of form, is the enlightened recognition?
Is that a question or a statement?
It's a question without a question mark.
Oh. Oh, what do Buddhists say? Is that the question?
Or is that correct?
I'm
Is this
reading
correct?
it.
Yeah, I think.
I'm reading it as it's written.
Right. Could you clarify?
She's
Okay. Yeah. Hello. Hi. Don't go away. Babies make noise. That's their nature. We like babies.
She says, question on what Buddhists would affirm. It's a question about doctrine.
Yes.
Would Buddhists say that recognition of self as undifferentiated?
So would Buddhists say recognition of self as undifferentiated is what enlightenment is?
Even in the face of form?
Yes, even in the face of form. Right.
Depends on which one you ask.
What?
Depends on which Buddhist you ask.
Yeah, it depends on which Buddhist you ask. Like, take a Buddhist for lunch. And, Buddhists who like to eat tacos will have a different answer from Buddhists who like to eat ramen. Because in a way, you could say what it's getting at, it might be the same. But the way it is expressed is different. Certain kinds of Zen talk would jive better with that statement there, the undifferentiated. Not all kinds. There are other kinds of Chan Zen that says no, that's not what it is. The Nyingmas are more likely to agree with this statement than the Gelugpas. So where we might be differing is here more a matter of how it is expressed. I was just reading a commentary on the Manjushri Namasangiti, a very important tantric text. And in there was a kind of a hypothetical question. This was a commentary written by Rongzompa, one of the great Nyingma masters. And I think it was Rongzompa. And Rongzom said, because Manjushri Namasangiti basically it translates to the litany of names of Manjushri. Manjushri is the Buddha or the Bodhisattva of wisdom. So it's a litany of names, as in it goes on and say, he is called this, and he is called this, and he is this, and he is this, and this is name, this is name. So it's a whole list of names. So in this commentary it says something like, I'm trying to remember, but it says something like, now, it goes something like this. It says, now, you might have a question as to whether Manjushri, as to whether Buddhas are all one or many. He says that. He says, based on this, you might think that Manjushri is the Buddha and the only Buddha. And all the 5 bazillion Buddhas are basically Manjushri. And so now you might be tempted to ask this question, or even to think that there is only one. Right? And so he says, so you might ask these questions. Are all the different Buddhas actually only one? Or are they many? Yeah? And then he says, all these Buddhas, they are not just one. There are many sentient beings who have recognized dukkha, transformed and purified dukkha and confusion and afflictive emotions, and arrived at the Buddha state. They each have their history, their stories, they are all of that. And now they have arrived at Buddha state. So they're not one. He says that. And then he goes, but insofar as did this Buddha achieve a higher wisdom than that Buddha? No. So in terms of what they achieve, it's all the same. So there's a saying, not in the commentary, but we have a saying, we say, everyone's samsara is different from everybody else's samsara. But when we achieve nirvana, it's the same nirvana that we experience. What? Latin. Right? So then the commentary, coming back to the commentary, then he says, now, mind you, one and not one, conceptions of one and not one, belong to this side of confusion. Belongs to this side of confusion. So he's saying, actually, you cannot say it's differentiated or not differentiated. And that doesn't mean it's undifferentiated. Help? Differentiated or undifferentiated. Yeah? It's here. Yeah? So on this side of confusion, there's an aspect, insofar as cleaning up our mess, everybody has to be different. I can't clean your mess for you, and you can't clean my mess for me. It's a good principle when you're roommates. You do your dishes, and I'll do my dishes. In terms of cleaning up your mess of samsara, everybody is different. In terms of it being clean, it's the same clean. Yeah? It's the same clean. But having said all of that, the Buddha state has no one not one. Which is not one. It's not one or not one. Now, yes.
The person asked about a Buddhist viewpoint. I have difficulty conceiving Buddhism as a religion. And I would say a Buddhist viewpoint would be, okay, what was the Buddhist teaching on this subject?
Yes.
So what's the Dharma viewpoint?
Right.
But yet, we call ourselves Buddhists.
Yes.
Is there a Buddhist religion?
Insofar as the Dharma has been transmitted, I would say, within the context of religion, then yes. I mean, if you walk around in Asia and you look, as far as an anthropologist or a sociologist, they're like, oh yeah, that's very much religion. If it's not religion, then I don't know what it is. But is the Dharma religion or not? I think then you're right. Dharma is not religion. But Dharma has been primarily transmitted within the context of religion. Does it need to continue to be transmitted within the context of religion? Remains to be seen. I don't know.
Okay, so you're saying it depends on the viewpoint. Anthropology says yes. It's religion.
Yeah, because they're like very religious like behavior going on.
IRS says it's religion.
Yeah, that's an important one. The IRS says it's religion, and so they can't touch us. Time to work on my parsonage. I don't know if y'all saw that John Oliver clip. Time to work on my parsonage. He's talking about some televangelist that has a $7 million property that he lives on. Is tax-free because it's his church's parsonage. It's like, I need to go find an attorney now. But really, I mean, it's religion as normally thought of, for sure. You observe, people who call themselves Buddhists or traditionally Buddhists, I mean, it's almost indistinguishable for whatever other religions do. But I would say that the Dharma, that which liberates, the vision, the enlightenment that was experienced under the tree, 2,500 years ago, that isn't religion. It's not quite psychology either. It's Dharma. It's things as it is. I mean, reality as it is. So whenever at least the way I talk about it, English being the primary language that I teach in, I always say that I distinguish between Dharma and Buddhism. I don't necessarily I don't have a problem with Buddhism because I think that's the Dharma existing in culture, and it has to exist in culture. Otherwise, where would it exist? It floating around the air. But be sure that we take refuge in Dharma. Don't take refuge in Buddhism. Okay? Be sure that we take refuge in the three jewels, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. Don't take refuge in Buddhism. Don't take refuge in Dharma Center. Don't take refuge in all the stuff, right? It doesn't mean go trash the Dharma Center. Please don't. It doesn't mean, go trash the religion. It's just knowing that there are always limitations. And if we take refuge in the religion, we'll be disappointed.
Did the early Christians put it in that category, or?
I don't know. Yeah, it's tricky. Like what is or isn't a religion?
I think we needed a category.
Yeah. Yes.
I could add something. I know this is one reason why reading the text in Tibetan is helpful, because it's not really it doesn't come up as a question, because what you might translate as Buddhism is Sangyevecha. It's not Sangyevicha. It's not the Buddha's Dharma. It's the Dharma of Buddhification. If I'm allowed to be literal, I like to translate it that way. The Dharma of Buddhification. The texts don't say the Buddha's Dharma or the Dharma of the Buddha. They say the Dharma of Buddhification.
Mm-hmm. So Buddha it's like this process.
Buddha as a verb.
As a verb. Yeah. Of course, now God is a verb. Yeah. So then, as far as views go, right? I mean, Buddhists are like Jews, right? 2 Jews, 3 views. So, and not joking aside, Buddha says that these views were given by him. He taught the different views because we have to rely on the views to go beyond views. Because this is our reality. You can't say that because Buddha is free from views, therefore I will be free from views now. Because you can't. Because what is the view that you have? Free from views. Then you're going to walk around, like all religions are one, all religions are one. Right? I mean, for you, all religions are one, all religions are one. The guy there is like, oh yeah, he belongs to the religion called all religions is one. I mean, now you have a new religion. It's called the religion of all religions are one. Yes, Buddha's state is free from attachment. But on this side of confusion, it's very dangerous to try to be free from attachments. Right now, what the path consists of is to intelligently choose one set of attachments over other sets of attachment. Be attached to the accumulation of merit. Be attached to the accumulation of wisdom. Be attached to the accumulation of habits of happiness. It's too early to be done with those types of attachments. If you're not attached to making a difference in the world, you won't get out of bed. Yeah. But right now, we are attached to other things to get us to get out of bed. Now, those other things could be better or could be worse, and it makes a difference. So I think, again, too much emphasis on what Buddha is like And we think that we can become that by just dropping attachment, dropping views, dropping, especially Mahamudra Dzogchen talk, like non-meditation. Ooh, wow, I like that. Don't have to meditate. Good. I'm feeling Buddha-like today. Non-contrived. Sure. Don't have to use my mind. Why not? Uncontrived dope smoking. Not contrived. Pretty good. But all that is like, ultimate level talk that is not, not very useful. It's good to kind of know that there's that. It's good to know that in that final state, no thoughts or words can reach. But you can't get there by turning your backs on words and thoughts and reasoning and contemplation. That's why we need the path.
Thank you for listening to the Urban Dharma NC podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, we hope you'll consider supporting our mission to foster a deeper understanding of the teachings of the Buddha, to build meaningful community, and to integrate contemplative teachings into everyday life. We invite you to make a donation online at udharmanc.com or make a purchase at our store, tibetanspirit.com. Thank you. May all beings benefit.